Hey everybody, today we are going to be taking a look at a deck that really hasn't been covered a whole lot in 2004, and that's going to be Shiftry. Now, heading into Worlds that year, Shiftry was actually probably one of the most hyped decks in the format. It had done quite well at the Stadium Challenges. Chris Fulop in particular I think he ended up second at a Stadium Challenge with it to secure his Worlds invite, and then he was actually planning on playing the deck at Worlds before he saw how popular Team Magma became in the grinders. Now, heading into a more modern 2004 format, and you see a lot of, I'm going to say, variation. It's not as Team Magma decks are, in my opinion, tier 1 decks, but they aren't the complete powerhouses that people believe them to be in 2004 after such a dominant performance at Worlds. So I think Shiftry is far better positioned right now in, like I said, a more modern 2004 meta than it actually was in the actual 2004 format. Now, that being said, fighting weakness is still incredibly tough. But at the same time, we are relying on a non-EX that trades exceptionally well with our opponent. So even if we do have to, say, send two Shiftrys into a Swampbird EX, we are still going to come out ahead in the prize trade in the long run, just due to how much more power and how much more efficient our non-EX attackers are. So starting off here, we play 4 copies of Dunsparce. This is an absolute staple in 2004. I think I have 19 or 20 decks built for 2004, and every single one of them plays 4 Dunsparce. It's just so great to have that strike and run option to set up. Then not only does that get us our basic Pokemon, but it also thins our deck by 5 cards after 2 strike and runs. So that'll help our consistency a lot. And then Sudden Flash is just an all-around great attack to either start putting damage on the opponent or just to buy ourselves a turn. Next up, we played 4 copies of C-Dot. I've looked at a lot of the different C-Dots. Essentially, before Diamond and Pearl, there was not a 50 HP C-Dot, so every C-Dot that is legally available is going to be at 40 HP. We don't run enough grass energies to make it worth playing the Growth C-Dot, and we don't run enough grass energies to make it worth the Razor Leaf, flip the coin, if heads you do 30, if tails you do nothing C-Dot. So we just went ahead and played the Tackle one. We can use that with our Grass Lightning or Darkness energies to get that initial 10 damage on the board. And while hitting 30 damage seems great, in the grand scheme of things, just the odds of doing that are going to be so much smaller. And this is a deck where literally 10 damage can make a huge difference. So just getting that initial damage on the board is so huge. Next up, I did go ahead and split the Nuzleaf line here. We play 1 copy of the Grass, 1 copy of the Dark. There's a couple of different reasons for that. One is situationally it's going to play better with our Friend Ball. Just in case we are playing against something that plays Dark, we're going to have a greater chance to be able to grab that Nuzleaf. On the opposite side of that, if we're playing against Grass, we'll be able to grab the Grass Nuzleaf. They both have pros and cons here. Upper Hand can actually be pretty good in certain situations, forcing your opponent to not be able to use a certain attack. Like I said, not great, but situationally there could be situations where that's useful from. And then being able to hit the bench for damage can also be situationally good. The Grass Nuzleaf I do think is better. I think that Stun Spore for 20 and Flip Coin for Paralysis is much stronger. And then you always have the chance of that Razor Wind. I will say that turn 2 chance, and it takes a lot to get the Nuzleaf, Double Rainbow, take that chance of doing 50 damage. Like we talked about with Blaziken, that turn 2 50 damage can be so strong because a lot of, basically, most of the basics in the format are 50 HP or less, so to just get that quick knockout can be huge. None of these situations are going to be incredibly common, being able to find Nuzleaf and a Double Rainbow on the second turn of your game, or things like Upper Hand and Feint Attack being good. The main reason, in my opinion, to split the lines is because the Dark Nuzleaf is fighting weak, while the Grass Nuzleaf is fire weak. To have that different weakness, especially in a format where Blaziken is so popular, I think it's really nice. Next up, we play 4 copies of Shiftry. We have Push Aside and then Supernatural Power. Push Aside does 30 damage. You look at your opponent's hand, you choose one of the Choose a basic revolution card in there, and your opponent shuffles it into their deck. The second attack, supernatural powered, is 40 damage. If you and your opponent have the exact same hand size, you hit for an additional 40 damage. Now, a couple of things to break down Shiftry here. First off, as I've talked about in the 2004 format, it can have some major consistency issues. So doing things like push aside from Shiftry to bury a Pokemon from your opponent can be really impactful, especially in the early stages of the game. And we're maximizing our odds of hitting this by playing both 4 Rare Candy and 4 Double Rainbow Energy. Now, going along with this too, you can modify this damage quite a lot with Dark Energies. So you can easily hit, I've had plenty of games where I'll push aside on the second or third turn of the game hitting for 50 damage, which is exceptionally strong that early in the game. Anytime you can take a knockout using push aside, you're generally going to want to do it. That being said, though, never give up a knockout to push aside. If you have a chance to either push aside and remove a Pokemon, or you can Supernatural and take the knockout, always take the knockout. Now, the Supernatural power is why Shiftry is an actual deck. 40 damage, you have the same hand size, you hit for 80 damage. Now, in 2004, 80 damage for 3 energy is exceptionally good on a non-EX. And we can modify that. You can set that up with a couple of Dark Energies. I was playing a game against Blaziken deck a couple of days ago where I was one-shotting Ruby Sapphire Blazikens just because I was able to drop a couple Dark Energies under Shiftry. It's also really easy to fulfill that with both Double Colorless or Double Rainbow Energy and Boost Energy, which I'll cover when we get down to the energy lineups. But essentially, a lot of cards in our deck play around matching hand sizes with the opponent and then just hitting for that really, really high damage number on a non-EX attacker. 2 Skitty, 2 Delcatty. Now, we do play the Delcatty line. I did go with the Minor Iron Run and Skitty. We only play 6 basic energies in the deck, and since we are relying on that Delcatty Magneton engine, we have to find those early. So I do like having that Minor Iron Run Skitty. I think you can make an argument to do a 1-1 split here as well, but I really want to be able to search out those energy early. 2 copies of Delcatty Energy Draw 3 cards. I would say I play this in probably 90% of my 2004 decks. Delcatty is just going to be the best consistency option for you in almost every single deck. One thing I do want to note with this deck is Delcatty is draw up to. So if you're in a situation where your opponent has, let's say, 8 cards in their hand and you have 7 cards in your hand, you can discard one. You can discard an energy. Now you have 6 cards in your hand, and then you can choose to draw just 2 cards to get back up to that 8 and match those hand sizes. Really, really think about how you're playing certain interactions there, because normally matching hand sizes is the difference between a knockout and not knocking out your opponent. 1 Magnemite, 1 Magneton. I think one of the biggest problems that I see with Shiftry decks is they do not play the Magneton. And I will see a lot of Shiftry decks try to play Furret and Delcatty, and I just don't think that's a winning recipe. I think you need to try to make sure that you're using Energy Draw as often, or you have that ability to use Energy Draw every single turn if you're able to. And Magneton getting back those energy for free is going to make sure that you one, have that energy to discard, and 2, you're not running out of resources while you're doing it. Once again, Magnetic Field is another great way for you to try to match hand sizes. Discard 1 card from your hand, choose up to 2 energy cards from your discard pile, put them into your hand. Between Delcatty and Magneton, you have a lot of synergy there to match hand sizes with the opponent. Next, I play 1 Bellsprout, 1 Victory Bell. This was something I've recently added to the deck. While 80 damage is really good, Victory Bell does a couple of different things. It does give us a way to hit those key support Pokemon. It does give us a way to take cheap knockouts on the bench. And it also gives us a grass attacker. I'm going to say this is not going to be enough to steal games from like a Team Magma deck or anything like that. But it's an okay attacker that we can use if we get into a pinch with Double Rainbow Energy. The reason I opted not to play Blossom in this deck is for a couple of different reasons. One, we are we're not playing anything with a lot of health. Shiftry at 110, that's a reasonable health. It's probably going to take the opponent 2 hits to knock it out. Maybe 3 if we're super lucky, but most likely 2. And in a lot of cases, that Blossom isn't going to do enough to our math to really change that. And 2, like I said, we just want to be able to search for those cheap prizes on the bench or really try to disrupt our opponent by going after that Delcatty or Magneton engine. In a lot of games, if our opponent gets set up with these really strong EXs, we want to be able to hit things that are going to give them the steam to finish that game out, such as hitting that Magneton line. Moving into the trainer lineup here, we play 4 Steven's Advice, 4 Copycat. This is, once again, I consider this almost essential for 2004. Almost every single deck that you're playing in this format, you should be maxing Stevens, you should be maxing Copycat. Just due to some of the inconsistencies in the format, these are 8 different cards where even if you're way behind in a game, if you top a Stevens, you top a Copycat, you can get yourself right back in there because that's usually going to net you a new hand of 6 cards with Stevens Advice and anywhere from 6 to 10 cards with Copycat. They're just monumentally huge cards in the format. And that's if you're behind. If you're winning and you have access to these cards too, it's going to help put you farther ahead. You got to max them out. 4 copies of Rare Candy. Not only do we play the 424 Shiftry line, we are also incorporating that Victory Bell. Got to make sure we have those Rare Candies to hit our stage 2s. On top of that, that's just going to add a little bit of consistency to the deck, making sure that we're not only seeing Shiftry, but we are seeing it often as well. Since Shiftry does have a 2 energy attack, if we are lucky enough to get that C-Dot Rare Candy Shiftry, we are able to start putting some real pressure on our opponent on the second turn of the game. 3 copies of Oracle, combo so well with Delcatty Magneton. We can also choose cards off Oracle that's going to help us match hand sizes as well. And I guess I should, if I can back up a minute here just to mention too, Stevens Advice is also a draw up to. So if you need a certain number to match a hand size, you can draw up to that number. Copycat, on the other hand, you don't get a choice with. You just automatically match the opponent's hand size. But once again, that's what we're trying to do anyways. So both Stevens Advice and Copycat are also great ways to help us match hand sizes for supernatural power. 2 copies of Warp Point. I just like Warp Point. Once again, we're searching for those easy prizes on the bench. We're playing non-EX attackers. We're just trying to get ahead in the prizes and then have the steam to close games out as well. I find special conditions to be incredibly annoying. And something I don't want a sudden flash turn or something like that to just put us in a spot where we just have to waste a turn, give our opponent another turn to get back into the game. The reason I'm not a fan of Briney's Compassion in this deck is for a couple of different reasons. One, we're not really tanking anything. Shiftry doesn't have a ton of health. We don't want to waste the time to pick it back up and then try to play it all back down. It's just going to be too slow for us. I like the ability to, if my opponent hits me with a sudden flash, they get lucky on that heads. I like that ability just to Oracle for the Warp Point and just have that immediate answer to it. It just, I think in my opinion, plays so much smoother than Briney's Compassion does. 2 copies of Friend Ball. With that Delcatty Magneton engine, this plays very well with other Delcatty Magneton engines in the format, just letting us search those parts out. At the same time, too, it's something that we could really easily burn to make sure we can match hand sizes. The ruling is you can copy something, and this is a common ruling in Pokemon, but I can say, for example, choose Skitty, look at my deck. I could sit there and look at 3 different Dunsparces, but since the deck is not public knowledge or not known by the game, I can then go ahead and fail that Friend Ball. So I don't have to take anything off of it, and I can drop my hand size by 1 by playing a normal trainer like that. 1 copy of Professor Elm's Training Method. This is to make sure that we can hit those Shiftry. There's not going to be very many dark Pokemon in the format, so being able to Friend Ball for a Shiftry is not going to be very common. Professor Elm's Training Method just combos well with the 4 Shiftry in general to make sure we can find one when we need it. 1 copy of Desert Shaman. Now, you might kind of wonder why we only play 1 copy of Desert Shaman, because after all, that seems to fit really well with the theme of things with both Victory Bell and then trying to copy hand sizes. Now, the thing is there's one little word in Desert Shaman that makes it a problem, and that says draw up to 4 cards. Your opponent does the same. So essentially, you have to draw your cards first, and then your opponent draws their cards. When you play your deck can draw up to 4 cards. Your opponent does the same. Yeah, I believe the ruling on Desert Shaman is that you have to draw your cards first. So it's very, very hard to use Desert Shaman to match hand sizes because they are always going to choose a smaller number. It's going to be very common for them to say choose 3 or choose 2 instead of drawing the full 4 to make sure they're not matching hand sizes. Now, there is some advantages to that. First off is they're not going to get the full 4 cards. And on the second side of that is, they're just not going to get the full 4 cards. But we do have a lot of different ways to play around with things to make sure that we are going to be able to match hand sizes. Even if they chose 2 cards, they choose 3 cards, or choose 1 cards. There's a little bit of psychology there on how many you want to draw, but we have things like magnetic field and energy draw and stuff like that to help us get to that matching hand sizes. 1 copy of Desert Ruins. Now, this is something you're going to see in a lot of my decks, is I just play a single copy of Desert Ruins. My general rule of thumb here is your Desert Ruin count should be the exact same as, it should be the same as most EX decks, how many stadiums most EX decks play, plus 1. Now, you'll see with a lot of the 2004 format that most EX decks don't play stadiums because it's honestly just not worth it for them to waste that space because there's not a ton of great stadiums in 2004. And if you're going into, say, a Blaziken mirror match, for example, and you're playing 2 copies of High Pressure System and your opponent's not playing 2 copies of High Pressure System, they're playing 2 better cards, your opponent's going to have a decent sized advantage in that matchup. Not huge, but let's even say 5%. It's going to be a noticeable advantage because you're running the High Pressure System, they're running better stadiums. Same thing with Gardevoir and Magnetic Storm. So if that ever went to change, like let's say EX decks are like, well, a lot of decks are only running 1 Desert Ruins, we're going to start playing 1 Stadium. Okay? Then you're going to have to up it to a 2nd Desert Ruins and so on and so forth. Generally, there's a pretty big diminishing return for non-EX decks to play Desert Ruins. So at most, you'd see 1 Stadium. You saw that in my Swampert deck from 2004 where I played a single copy of Island Cave to help deal with Dunsparce. So the 1 copy of Desert Ruins is more of just a meta call, but depending on how players are playing, that number could go back up to 2. I don't think you're ever going to be at a point where it gets to 3. I don't think you're going to see a lot of decks trying to run 3 stadiums. And I don't even think a lot of decks are going to try to run 2 stadiums without losing too much of an advantage. 1 copy of Town Volunteers, just to send those Shiftry back. Make sure we got access to them. Moving into our energy lineup here, we play 4 copies of Darkness Energy. Absolutely essential with Shiftry. It adds 10 damage to our attack, free plus power, and just really easy to do. 4 double Rainbow Energy. Make sure that we are hitting, getting those 3 energy in place super quickly. 1 dark, 1 double Rainbow Energy. Actually trade it pretty evenly there because you're adding 10 for the darkness, you're taking 10 away for the double Rainbow Energy. So that's a pretty strong combination here. Next up, we play 5 Grass Energy, 1 Lightning Energy. Now, I did have to include a pretty large number of basic energy to make sure that we are getting value out of that Magneton. But as soon as you hit 1 or even 2, you are just going to be in the money with Magneton. And from there, it's just kind of the rest of it's just kind of gravy. I really thought about what the breakdown I wanted to do on those energy lineups were, and I opted to go with 5 Grass because I do feel that, to be honest with you, it's not going to make a huge difference. Very rarely in games are you gonna is the basic energy gonna make any sort of difference. But when I have 6 basic energy to choose from, I've got to decide which rare situations I feel are going to be the most common, if that makes sense. So I just simply felt that a turn 2 Stun Spore and the random chance that I'm going to want to attack with Victory Bell is going to be a much more common situation than me wanting to go into a game with attacking with my 1/1 Magneton line, especially when I've also got 4 double Rainbow Energy that also combo with it. So the 5-1 split I felt was a pretty solid play for me there. Lastly, I play 1 copy of Boost Energy. This is just another thing I feel like a lot of Shiftry decks miss the mark on, is playing high counts of Boost Energy. You really just don't need it. We do play Oracle in the deck, so we are able to search out that 1 Boost Energy when we need it. But the thing that I don't like about Boost Energy is when you play Boost Energy, you get all excited because you can Supernatural Power for a turn. However, you're also putting yourself one behind on the energy drops, because boost energy is going to go away at the end of the turn. So essentially, I think it's a lot easier to do like a dark and a double rainbow, or a basic and a double rainbow, and then make sure you're not losing that energy drop for the turn. Now, I do like to have the 1 copy of boost in here, because I do like, if I find in a situation where my opponent is, I'm just way behind in the game, I have to get an attack off right now, I do have access to that 1 boost. I can search it out and then use supernatural power. Or if I'm going to send up a Shiftry that I know is going to get knocked out anyways, and I don't want to put a huge investment into it, I can just boost and do that supernatural power. So, alright guys, that is going to be Shiftry for the 2004 format. I actually think the deck is a ton of fun to play. It does take some skill and some thinking to make sure you're matching hand sizes and you're really watching how you're playing your cards, but this is a deck I've worked with a lot over the last couple of years, and I'm really proud of the effort that I put into it and the list that's come out of it. I think this is a lot better than a lot of the Shiftry decks from the time and that I've seen come out since then. I think this is a better list than what I put in my 2004 article I wrote back in 2015 too. But that's just because I've had more time to work with the list and more time to test it. But anyways, if you like this video and you want to see more content like this in the future, please make sure you like and subscribe to the channel. And of course, I hope to see you in the next video.